Hey, what's up everyone? Toy Bro here for another review, and we're taking a look at the Star Wars Black Series Rey's Speeder with Rey in the Scavenger Mode action figure from Hasbro. We have got our box here, and it's kind of a, it's standard Black Series from what we're used to. Of course, this is a larger item, so it is in a bigger box, but it kind of echoes the same design that we got with the TIE Fighter box. We got our figure here in a window. We got a shot of Rey on the speeder there up at the top, and we've got an artist rendering of Rey on her speeder kind of speeding through the deserts of Jakku with some schematic type drawings up here. On the back, it's just a bit of a write-up, and then we have got some more shots of the figure. So let's pull this thing out and take a closer look. All right, now here is the entire package out of the box, and we're going to take a look at Rey first, but I wanted to give you a shot of the overall kind of completed setup here with the speeder and with our figure. Obviously, we're going to put them all together, and I'll show you what she looks like on the vehicle. But let's move the speeder out of the way, and we're going to take a look at the figure itself just to see what is going on with this new version of Rey. So here is our Scavenger Rey figure, and we've all seen the movie at this point. I don't think anybody has not seen The Force Awakens. And if you haven't, I mean, just what's wrong with you? We know that this is the Rey from the beginning of the movie when she's scavenging for parts. So she's in her full getup to protect her from the, the elements. And so she's got the shawl on her, she's got the mask, she's got the goggles, she's got the hood wrap, all that kind of stuff. I do think this is a pretty decent figure overall. Let's take a look at kind of the details of it. So head can swivel side to side. You can't really go up or down just because of the sculpt of the figure. There is a hinge and rotation on the arm. Nothing really gets in the way. The shawl does kind of get in the way a little bit, but like you're not going to have her arms up that high. There is no bicep swivel. There's rotating elbow and a hinge, and then we've got rotating and hinged wrists. She does have a upper diaphragm joint, so it acts as rotation, and then it'll also allow her to bob back and forth, but only slightly. It's not going to work too much. Legs can go out a bit. Again, they would probably be a little better if they didn't have all the soft goods hindering them, and then they go up almost 90. They go back a decent bit as well. They do rotate. Let me lift that up there. They can rotate in the joint, and then they can rotate at the thigh. She does have double jointed knees, of course, that's a given. And then we have hinge and rocker at the foot. Let me get her straightened up here. As far as the sculpt goes, this is obviously a different figure than we've gotten before. There's a lot of differences here. Most of it is in the head, and what I found, just kind of playing around with her, is this is actually kind of two pieces that are attached. So there is, I don't know if I'm going to be able to show it very well, there are unpainted eyes underneath there. So it's a full head sculpt with the goggles and the headpiece attached. So you can kind of move the goggles around, because I thought my goggles were slightly askew when I pulled her out, and it's because it's not part of the head. It's a separate piece on top of the head, which I guess I should have expected that, but at the same time I wasn't. I think the goggles are sculpted pretty well. There's a lot of sculpted detail in the hood wrap. You can see a lot of just wrinkles and the knots that she's tied in there, and that kind of bleeds down into the shawl, which sits over top of her shoulders. Overall, I think the upper half of the figure is pretty well done, and then we kind of lead down into the soft goods, and it's not a lot of material there that sits over top of her. It's just kind of this crisscross fabric, and it's tattered, and it's kind of ratty, looks pretty good. And then of course she does have a soft goods kind of skirt, which again, like I mentioned, it does hinder her articulation to a degree, but not to the point where it's really any kind of big deal for me. She can still get her legs out really far, even with that in the way. It's just another thing that kind of sits on top of her. Her arms have her standard kind of Jakku wraps and leads into the gloves, and then she does have pants on, and then she has the boots on, which have a lot of sculpted and textured detail on them. The backpack that she has on is actually a separate piece. This is technically one of the accessories. You saw it on the packaging shot, but I got it on her because, it's part of her get-up. And there's a lot on here. There's a lot of paints. We've got greens and silvers, and overall I think it's sculpted really well. It actually can come off, obviously. I'll pull it off now. You can pull it off just like that, and then take it aside for a second, and you can just see how it sits on her. It's got a couple canteens with some water on there, and then you just slide these straps into the holes there, and it actually sits on her pretty well. I haven't had any issues with it falling off of her, and it looks pretty decent on the figure. She also has a belt, which is attached to this kind of pouch, which is a olive green color, and there is some paint detail on that as well. There's obviously paint on her gloves and then on her boots, and then we have got paint on her face, but it's really just the lips, and then of course there is paint on the goggles for the green, and then there's that kind of tan color with some silver. So there's not tons and tons of paint on her, but there's enough, and where it is cleanly applied, and I don't have any issues with paint slop or anything like that. So let's take a look at the rest of her accessories, because there are a couple others in addition to the backpack here. So this is a Rey figure. We're definitely going to get her staff, and I like the staff. I think it's a pretty decent weapon. There's a lot of sculpted detail on it, and there's paint on it. It's got the strap, so you can hang it over her shoulder if you want. It does attach to the speeder, and we will go over that shortly. And you know, it's pretty much what you expect. We've seen this by now, and you're familiar with this accessory. The other accessory that she comes with is this little kind of mouth scarf kind of wrap that sits over top her face. So I'm going to pull the staff out of her hand for a second, and I'll show you how this works. So I didn't go over this in the sculpt because I wanted to talk about it here, but there is a little notch in her chin there, and what you do is you take this and you pop it on, and it sits on her face kind of like this. Now, I don't particularly like it, and I may need to play with it some more, but as you can see, it doesn't sit flush on her face. At least mine does not. Maybe what I should be doing, instead of dropping her, is kind of heating it up and forming it a bit, because this side actually does sit on it correctly. It's just this side right here. So I figure if it is sitting on her face a little better, it'll look nicer. But overall, it's basically just a piece of plastic that gives you the option of doing a masked or unmasked version of Rey, and it does sit on her face surprisingly well, despite just being held in with that little notch. So overall, not a bad figure. It's got a few pleasant surprises in terms of how its soft goods sits, and the fact that there is a full sculpted face under there, which is irrelevant in the end, in the grand scheme of things, but it's just something to point out. So pretty decent Rey. I actually like this one better than the first one, if only she had an unmasked head to go along with it to kind of top everything off. That would be fantastic. So let's take a look now at that speeder. Okay, so obviously this is the star of the show. This is why we're buying this. The Rey figure is pretty good, but this is definitely what you want. You're not buying this whole thing just to get another Rey, are you? So we've got a few things to talk about. There's some moving parts. There's some things that pop in and pop out. And overall, I'm just going to say it now, I think it's a pretty cool speeder. So you could probably end the review there and go out and buy this thing. But let's take a deeper look here. So we have got, we've obviously got the net. Well, we'll start with the net. So we've got the net. It attaches on these hooks. And then while we're speaking of these hooks, that's also where the staff goes. So you just kind of clip it on, and it'll sit right on there just fine. That's about all you need to know about the staff on this. My only real gripe with this thing, with the entire speeder, I think, is that the hooks for this net are kind of weird. So I'm going to pull it off for a second, and you can see what I'm talking about. The hooks on the bottom are actually facing up, so you would think that they would be turned around, so everything would be pulling on everything else. But in this case, they're not. You kind of hook them through, and they'll just sit in there, which is okay. I mean, it's not a big deal. It was just kind of an oddity. I thought it was kind of weird when I first put it all together, because you do have to put the net on yourself, and then you just hook it on like this. It's easier when the junk isn't in there, but hook it on, and there you go. The junk, since we're talking about all of this, I'm going to pull the net off again. Might as well just take it off. It is a separate piece. It pegs in. There we go. So it just pegs in. You can see there is a wash on this giant hunk of gray plastic with a little bit of gold on it. But you just pop it in to these two pegs, and there you go. Really easy to put together. There's not a whole lot to this thing overall. You can see that we've got the kind of trademark dent on this thing. We have got an opening flap here that shows you some of the inner workings of the speeder. Just some gray with like a bunch of, it's like a splatter. I guess it's supposed to look like oil, and then a copper inside of there. And it just shuts together. It's just a hinge door. We've got these two pieces. I don't really know what they are. They're possibly, repulsors maybe or something like that. They pop out, but I'm assuming that's just for ease of manufacture, because there's no way they could have made this with this attached. We have got the stand, which pivots, so it's on a ball joint. And this kind of supposed to look like sand kind of spraying up as it moves. So it could use a wash. I mean, it could use some brown on it, really. But it's a cool stand. I like it. It's very useful, and obviously it makes it look like it's levitating. We've got some wraps hanging off here. We've got some some kind of nasty dry paint on there from age. We've got the air brakes on here. They move, so they're hinged. And then, of course, you've got her seat here with the controls. The controls move. You can pull the levers back. The foot pedals do move. And then the back, we've got some engines there and another air brake, and you can see her little rucksack on the side there. On this side, we've got a couple different things to work with here. We've got an opening panel on this side. So again, it shows you more of those inner workings, and the kind of gray with the splatter black for, just kind of nasty, oily engine. But then at the same time, the whole thing pops off, so you can see the whole inner workings of it. I'm not sure if anybody's ever going to display it this way, but it's cool to be able to do this, and you can kind of see there is a lot of sculpted detail inside of this engine. I mean, ideally they didn't have to do that, so I like the fact that they've been kind of going the extra mile with these vehicles. And then you can see just the control panel on there with the gauges and the cluster in there, and then the front has got that kind of ribbed look to it. So overall, I mean, I think it's a really cool looking vehicle. It's kind of where these vehicles need to be. I don't really think we need any more incredibly expensive, humongous vehicles like the TIE Fighter. That's not to say I'm not going to buy them, but I think this is kind of more where this scale should live, just because things get way too big, way too fast in the Star Wars universe. And, I still don't really have a place for that TIE Fighter, but I've got one. So we're going to take a look now and see just how Rey fits on this and how she looks while she's on it. All right, so here she is on the speeder, and there's really not a lot to do to get her on there. The pedals have pegs that her feet will fit into. I only had issue with one of them. The left side seemed to be a little harder for me to get on than the right, but it's in there. Not a big deal. And then her hands can grip onto both of the control sticks at the same time, and then you just kind of hunch her over and sit her on down. There's really not much to it. I mean, it's obviously a little different than the Luke speeder where he kind of just slides in, but this one's a little more dynamic. You can see her. The only way I wish that I think this could be a little better is if she had more of a crunch to actually hunch over a little better. But for the most part, I think she looks pretty good on this, and you can kind of get her posed to where she's just kind of speeding on down. Kind of take a look at it from another angle there. You can see that she is sitting on it pretty decently, and I don't really have any issues with it. Again, I said that the only real problem was that I had some trouble getting one peg into one foot, and that's not an issue now. Overall, I'm pretty damn pleased with this thing. I like the design of the speeder. It's different. It's not a conventional speeder that we're used to in the Star Wars universe. I like the paint on it. There's a lot of paint on this thing. It's nicely sized. It's not too big. It's not too small. And then, of course, it's got all the little extras that are added. We've got the net. We've got the junk piece. We've got the moving flaps and the doors that open and the various inner workings with the engine itself and all of the extra paint apps that are included there. And then, of course, we get a new figure on top of that. They could have just said, hey, let's give them a vehicle. They already have a Rey figure, but they decided to go a little bit further and add this figure to give us a little bit more of a deluxe package. And I think the price isn't too high for what we're getting here. So I am overall pretty pleased with it. I think it's a cool vehicle and a pretty good figure. So that is going to do it for this look at the Star Wars Black Series Rey's Speeder with Rey figure from Hasbro. Let me know what you guys think down below. Feel free to like, share, subscribe, do that whole thing. And until next time, everyone.